A very good evening and welcome to this edition of The Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangusha-Mpaga, and with me in studio tonight, I have a team of journalists to discuss, among others, the release of the 2018 results for O-Level. 2019 results for O-Level. Sorry, I think I was thinking in reverse. 2019 results for O-Level, which continue to show dismal performance in the science subjects despite all the investment and all the talk about focusing on science subjects. But this is generally pulling down overall performance of pupils at Senior 4. These results were released on Friday. Performance, more urbanized areas continue to perform much better than the rural areas. What does this mean going forward? What does this mean for the country's drive towards the push for more science-oriented education? We'll also be discussing plans to review the curriculum for O-Level, Senior 1 to Senior 4, which the National Curriculum Development Center is set to roll out very soon. And we'll discuss President Yoweri Museveni and his Rwandan counterpart, Paul Kagame, continuing to engage to resolve the crisis, the standoff between the two countries that has now been running for a year, since 28th of February 2019. It's still running. We understand that the two leaders are headed back to Luanda, Angola. I think they should have been in Angola today, earlier today. Yes, in Angola today to continue with the discussion. This is where they signed a memorandum of understanding to normalize relations, and we saw some actions between, especially in Kampala, in an attempt to normalize relations, which remain highly fragile. Members of Parliament, Odonga Otto was the most exciting. He said, very soon you'll see a cold coffin out of this house. And he said this man has had 2 accidents at the same spot. And then he said he only defended himself. But interestingly, he said he went to hospital after a slap. He called it a punch. Said he went to hospital and might consider going abroad to take a further check. And the man who boxed him or slapped him, a fellow member of Parliament, says, he knows me, I'm a heavyweight. If I had boxed him, he wouldn't be there. He would be in a completely different place. The drama within Parliament of members of Parliament now exchanging blows in the House. What does that mean? We'll be discussing that. I have with me, starting with Lydia Namubiru. Lydia is Africa editor, 50/50 Open Democracy. Last time we had you here, you also work. Oh, is this the Quaz thing?
I think that was at least a year ago.
A year ago. Okay, now it's 50/50 Open Democracy. What is this?
So Open Democracy is an independent media platform based in the UK. We are sort of, unlike most journalists, we like to campaign around the issues we cover. And the section I work for, 50/50, is a feminist section. So we cover feminist issues, women's issues.
What do you mean feminist? Feminist section means what?
It means we cover issues that that we see as getting in the way of basically overcoming discrimination based on gender or sexual orientation or gender identification. I
have Moses Cheyune. Moses is a reporter at the Daily Monitor based at Parliament. Very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles.
And we have Agatha Twaire, who's an independent journalist and a lawyer. Agatha, very nice to have you.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, viewers.
I want to start with you, Lydia, because I know you and me have had some relationship with actual classroom teaching on the other side, not just as students, because you've taught for some time, even very briefly.
Very briefly, but I have a deep relationship with education. Both of my parents are educationists.
Okay. What do you make of these results? Because beyond the celebration, beyond the discussion that results have been released, what sense do they make in our education journey? The minister released the results for O-Level 2019. They look as they look.
Yeah.
What do they mean?
I mean, so to speak specifically to like poor performance in science subjects, I mean, first of all, we need to remember at some point, so what are we comparing it to? At some point, it became compulsory for every student to do science subjects, whether or not they felt inclined to, whether or not they felt they had any aptitude for it. It became compulsory. So you're going to have more failures, also quite simply because you have far more people doing the subjects than used to be the case. Then when we talk about investments, like labs built, if you, I imagine teachers now are about my age. When we did these subjects and I was a science student, if you are not in the so-called first world schools, you didn't do practical science. So you can build a lab, you can even equip it, but if the teacher who is teaching right now is from my generation of students who didn't themselves do didn't study sciences practically, so it's going to take a long time.
So what you think is that you have a
improvement.
deeper problem than what government is trying to deal with, that it's not just the pupil you should be focusing on, or the student, but you should also be focusing on the training of those who pass on the knowledge, responsible for passing on the knowledge to the learners.
Yes, and I imagine there are some programs for getting teachers to catch up, but still it's going to take a while. And so I also think how we measure success, is it improving, is it not, needs to just take into account all of those things. You have more students doing these subjects, including students who do not feel particularly inclined towards them, including students in schools that may have a lab building but don't have a properly qualified teacher, don't have, if they had a choice, they wouldn't do these subjects. So it's going to take a really, even if everything goes fine, it will take a really long time for performance to improve, I mean, considering what the baseline was, but still things aren't even where they need to be, for sciences to be taught meaningfully.
Just one more question before I come to my colleagues here, to the other colleagues in studio tonight. Have we done proper interrogation of the kind of training that the teachers who come out of teacher training colleges, NTCs, the kind of teachers who are coming out of university with a Bachelor of Arts in Education? What kind of training are they getting if they are going to teach science? Even when they're coming out of primary teacher training colleges, PTCs, what kind of training is there to say if this teacher is in class teaching sciences, they know exactly what they're talking about? Because years ago they would pick somebody from a different field, not necessarily trained as a teacher, to teach sciences because they're inclined in that direction. If they're not, then
we talked about this when the PLE results came out. First of all, how much we have divested from teacher training, how much we have devalued the profession of teaching, such that even now the students who opt for teaching are often on the weaker end. The highest performing students go and do law, go and do engineering. Somewhere along the way we decided, perhaps because teachers are so poorly paid, it sent a message that you didn't have to be good at what it is you mean to teach to go and become a teacher. So that's part of the problem. And then the way the hiring is done remains very rigid. You need to have, you need to have gone through a teacher training college, even though perhaps an actual engineer, and there are many who don't have jobs, may be a better teacher. Somebody who went further with it. So there's that, like teacher training.
A lab technician, a chemist,
yes,
would have been a better.
Would have been a better teacher. But still, though, how do you get onto that government payroll? You have to prove you have certain qualifications, certain papers, which a lab technician might not have. But the person who did go to an NTC, yes, got the right paper, but went to it having not made the mark for the actual technical field. So there's that, like I think teacher quality is really low, and we need to think about these things. Like when I say teacher quality is low, I'm not talking about Namagunga, Nabisonsa, Kisubi, St. Mary's, Chitende. What we're talking about, schools in Gulu, including schools. You're talking about schools in Nakasongola, schools in Luero. My mother's sister is still a head teacher for a school in Luwero. They don't even have a lab, and people talk about, they may have a building, but there's nothing going on in there. They're still dependent on the USE funding to pay teachers, not to pay teachers, but to run the school. They're not going to buy lab equipment. They're still teaching students. They're still giving them papers. Here's the experiment. If you do A, B, C, D, this is what will turn out. But they're not actually doing those experiments.
Agatha, let me turn to you. Many people who studied in rural schools many years ago, their first encounter with an actual experiment in biology, for example, or in chemistry, was on the day of the examination.
I did. I started in in the rural area. And yeah, the lab we had, like Lydia said, was a building. We had a building called the lab that we went to like every once a month. And you would go there and there are like 2 apparatuses for a class of about 80. And I never did any practical things. I never
You didn't even touch the Bunsen burner and heat to see to check for protein.
Fortunately, during my time, fortunately, there were not the only compulsory science subject was biology, so I was taking it just because of that. And it brings me to what I've seen everyone talking about, the attitude towards science subjects, that it could lead to the performance we are seeing. But I want to start with just saying, despite all the investment in sciences, what investment? Exactly what investment? We are still talking about buildings that have no equipment for the lab. We are still talking about lack of teachers. So how do you expect to have different results when, so in the end the attitude is shaped by the failure rate that you have seen many people fail sciences. If you are in a home of many children, like your elder siblings have all failed, and you say, why do I take something I'm going to fail anyway? And now it becomes worse when you make it compulsory and it's forced on someone. That even worsens the mentality of doing the subject. Fortunately,
but how do you align that with the same people complaining that the roads are being built, are being funded by Chinese, they're being built by Chinese engineers, that we don't have presence apart from people waving flags to tell you now you can move, now you should move slowly. If you're going to change that narrative, which I think is what government is trying to do, to say, look, we cannot see transformation, actual transformation, in a world where someone was joking the other day that the kind of computer literacy that's being trained today, the world has moved on so much so far. We're trying to get to, even to adjust to 3G and get 4G for the mobile phone. The world is moving 5G. Your scientists, the people you're training, are not even there. How long are you going to play?
You are not training them. That's what we, unless the investment you're talking about is the talk of every time they have failed, every year in, year out, people are saying, oh, we should focus on science subjects. But in the end, do they focus on them? And when you're having the success rate in science subjects at 18% or less, how are you going to translate that into all the fields that need scientists and leave actually some to go back and teach? So the main problem that we are dealing with is you have no teachers that are teaching these science subjects, at least efficiently, because what rural schools resort to is get a senior 6 dropout who did well, by well is a credit 5 or 6 in chemistry, to come back and teach, because there are no teachers, and even when they are there, they cannot afford them. Because now a teacher thinks, I am a science teacher, I shouldn't earn the peanuts that teachers earn. So
I was talking about investment in relation to government has been giving an incentive to science teachers.
But was it ever a problem of numbers or was it quality? I mean, how many engineers build a bridge? You just, if they are good quality engineers, and even if we all knew how to build a bridge, would we build bridges? So I think, so we often come up with these very blunt instruments for fixing problems. Okay, so there are not enough engineers, or the engineers are not good enough, or quite simply, the engineers are not building bridges. Like, let everybody go and learn how to build a bridge, as if that's all it takes. Like, everybody knowing how to build a bridge. You still need money, you still need, and you need these people to pass, to actually learn. So I don't see how merely increasing the number of people who are studying this subject improves the
sciences. So you think it's a problem to push pupils to learn the subject, to learn science subject?
Especially if we don't have the capacity to teach them and to just come. So this is just a ticking of the box. Now everybody learned physics. They didn't actually learn, but they sat for the paper.
They didn't pass it.
They didn't pass it, but they sat for the paper. I think you know that prayer, accept the things you can't
change.
Yes. So it's sort of like, it's, if we are not yet, the level of the amount of money we have on us is not enough to teach the 300 students in this particular class sciences. It's fine to let some of them not, and then if 50 take the subject, then you teach those 50 better than you would if you had a class of. So you have a shortage of teachers, but you're actually increasing the number of students who have to do these subjects. You have a shortage of
teachers, you have a shortage of equipment.
You have a shortage, you have a shortage of funding.
Because science equipment is very expensive, and
to say nothing about supplies for the experiment itself.
Yes. And you realize that many of the private schools will excel in art subjects because they are reluctant to invest in buying lab equipment for chemistry, for biology, for physics, because it's very expensive to get, and they think they shouldn't waste their time investing in that if concentrating on the art subjects is going to give them the grades that they want and the media space that we give them once the results are out. But Moses, you are a lot more active in the field than some of us are, attending these releases and press conferences. Is there discussion from officials at the Ministry of Education? What kind of discussion from the minister, for example? What kind of concern from UNEB and from the technical people to say, wait a minute, this is where we're concentrating, these are the numbers that we're getting, and something needs to be done?
Well, in most cases, I'll say that these officers you're talking about are apologists. They will always come up and say, science subjects were done worse than art sciences. I mean, art subjects, but they will not tell you the reasons why. Because when the ladies were discussing about about the results, I was wondering, who is teaching the Ugandan children? Agatha talked about some senior 6 dropout who comes and is retained by a school, a village school, to help at least facilitate and teach learners who are supposed to be fellow learners in this case. You failed, but you've been brought back to teach. But even without talking about the senior 6 dropout, let's look at the universities. Which kind of student goes to take or to undertake a course in teaching, on education? It's people that have been told that for you failed. You failed to get.
True? Is that actually true? If you look at the requirements for being enrolled on the Bachelor of Arts with Education at Makerere University, is it actually people have failed? Is it factually accurate? And
yes,
the other thing we need to be conscious about is that there are teachers watching us.
Yes.
They are possibly qualified, competent, and they're putting in their time to try and train scientists for this country.
That's true.
Yes.
And I think
so I'm reluctant to bundle them together.
That's very true.
The competent ones and the incompetent ones, the qualified ones and the unqualified ones, to bundle them together in generalities that may not.
You see, I think when you're talking about this education system, true, science subjects at all levels were done according to the results and what we know was compared to the art subjects. But about the teaching, the learning of teachers themselves, you can ask them. They will tell you that by the time senior 6 results were released, because the senior 6 results are the basis upon which they enrolled to university, some of them even didn't know what course they should pursue at the university. So they find themselves in a situation where they say, okay, let me take up education, and they apply.
Let me ask Charles, what are the first choice courses for a scientist who has scored about 20, 18, 17, 16
Of course,
points?
not education.
Exactly.
Majority not
That's
education.
what we are saying.
But
So-
you
so
see,
sh-
it used to be. That's the thing.
Yes.
It used to be.
So
You
what
had
went
to
wrong?
be an excellent student to become a teacher.
And today?
And today you don't have to be. And the thing is, if you're going to teach something, and I don't blame students, excellent students for not choosing to become teachers because it's paid so little that sends a message, this is not worth your time. This is not worth your hard work. And you're going to be so poorly equipped even on the job, it's going to be demoralizing. You just came out of a school system where you saw, what your teachers had to deal with.
So for instance,
Let me take the same question Lydia is talking about. Do you blame a Ugandan child who chooses
No.
to study education, to go into education, because one, it's relatively cheap at the university. Two, yes, it will give you a professional qualification, and might give you an opportunity to change a life or two if you teach them well.
No, I don't.
You don't blame the ones who excel, you blame those who take up education.
No, I am actually really, really grateful for people who still choose to become teachers because there's hardly any incentive for it, especially if you're good at what you do. And this is true at nearly all levels. Even when you're a university lecturer, there's hardly any incentive to continue teaching. So a lot of people who are teaching are really doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. However,
Or lack of option.
or lack of options, and that's the sad part, is for you to be a teacher out of lack of other options, for us to have built a system. So it's never really about the individuals and the choices they make. It is what choices are forced upon us by the system and what it values and what it devalues.
Okay. Yes, Moses, you're continuing.
yes, I was saying that you have that category of teachers, we have told you. They have no option. They have gone into education. After graduating, they have gone into, some of them end up into miserable schools. We've been talking about schools, most of them government schools without facilities. Yes, there are some private schools that don't have laboratories and libraries, but what is the situation in the government-run schools? Now, when they come up and say sciences are not doing well, and yet the government agenda is about pushing for sciences, you remain asking yourself whether indeed the government, in asking most students to enroll for sciences, they have a clear agenda. I know of students who have done courses in engineering at the university and they have passed. I know students who have done medicine and they have passed, but they have no jobs.
And they have been taught by these same poor teachers.
Yes, because sometimes
Is that a contradiction?
It is not.
it is not. Sometimes
That somebody excels as being a medical doctor, a physicist, an engineer, and because those are the courses that
Charles,
they chose.
the people who are excelling should be also, we should also know who are these students that are excelling. Where do they go?
And
Which
Lydia started by classifying
yes.
the schools.
Which schools do they go to? Because a school that has its facilities in place, it can facilitate and pay teachers well, definitely the teacher will be motivated to come and teach. And at the end of the day, you'll have a good product. Look at a student you're telling to do sciences in Karamoja. You know, you tell someone, just here in Chankwanzi, schools are running without teachers. Schools are studying under trees. Now, under a tree, what kind of laboratory will you have? I know of a student in a modern school who asked his parents to send some money for a Bunsen burner. Of course, because even he only knew Bunsen burner, he had not even seen it. And parents, poor parents used to send money, you know, because one, the parent did not go to school to see the things. Now he's trying to educate his own child to at least be able to make ends meet. Now the student, one, is in a poor school. He has joined groups that are not, what can I say, that are not so academic, that they don't care. You know, there are groups in schools that are not.
The environment sometimes pushes you
exactly.
on how much ambition you'll have and how much aspiration.
So you find some students getting wasted in peer groups. They want to ask for money. And it happens when such students go to schools that are
Okay,
not...
let me just run this in the next 1 minute from you, Lydia, to Agatha here. What should be done differently?
I think we really should be realistic about how many science students we can teach with the resources we currently are putting into with the investments we currently are putting into. And to me, I mean, it's never, there's no shame in realizing, you know what, that was the wrong move. Let's roll it back.
Okay.
Or let's implement it over a longer time.
Moses, what would you say? What should be done?
Yes, Lydia is talking about the investment. Indeed, the investment is needed. Government should come up and facilitate its teacher as well. They have, for the last 3 years, they've been talking about salary enhancement, which has not come. The government is running schools that don't have laboratories, that does not have well-trained science teachers. So I think they need to work out on this, hire teachers, have them paid well, and let's see the results.
Agatha?
I think our government should really set its priorities in order of what is more important in this country. The education sector has for a long time been neglected, and you see it from teachers striking all the time. That is from primary to secondary and to the university. So if the investment we talk of, if it was real tangible investment, maybe we would start to see some results.
I would love to see what kind of, and for us as journalists to investigate, what kind of training and training facilities exist in the teacher training institutions, be it at degree level or at certificate level for primary school teachers, and at diploma level. I went through National Teachers College, Kakoba, many years ago, but I don't remember a science lab. I don't seem to remember. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't, but I don't seem to remember that we had a science lab. Now, we'll take a quick commercial break, but as come out of the break, the Education Ministry has reported that the new curriculum for the lower secondary school will be rolled out, I think starting this year. And they say the number of subjects have been reduced from 43 to 21. And schools to teach 12 subjects at senior 1 and 2, out of which 11 will be compulsory. You're talking about forcing everybody to do things they must do. 11 are compulsory, so you have only one choice if you're studying from in senior 1 and senior 2. Well, one will be from an elective menu. The optional subjects are not many. And then senior 3 and senior 4 will exit with a minimum of 8 or maximum of 9 subjects, with 7 of them compulsory. So the choices are getting a little bit more squeezed. It will be interesting to see which these subjects are, and we'll discuss that after a very short commercial break. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we started discussing performance, the results of O-Level for 2019 that were released on Friday by the Minister of Education and Sports, and the dismal performance in science subject that's been running for many years. But then the Minister of Education has announced that it will be rolling out a new curriculum for O-Level. 12 subjects,
Yep.
11 compulsory. And then by the time you get to senior 3 and senior 4, like used to happen before, you drop some subjects to do what you think are your best 8 subjects or your best 9 subjects. And even then, you have pretty much limited option, because if 7 out of the 8 are compulsory, you have only one choice of an additional subject. So I'm imagining mathematics, English, automatic, physics, chemistry, all the science subjects. Yes. Are compulsory.
So that's already 5.
What kind of people are they going to create? And this obsession with sciences, I know we want to become middle income. Our Vision 2040 has a bullet train on the cover to show our aspirations. We want to fly to the moon. So we want to build rockets. We want to be in the science age. We want to be producing, I think by the time we reach 2040, we should be producing 10G phones because now we are rolling out 5G. We should be able to have labs that create things and make things, medicines and everything else. But in this world, is that, Lydia, I want to start with you. Is this a sustainable approach to doing things when we find that globally, some of the people who have the most money, at least if you, yes, innovators have the most money, still make more money than average others. So if you're talking about the revolution being made, I mean the financial revolution made by people who are inventing in Facebook, Microsoft, and others, Amazon selling online and stuff like that, they are heavily reliant on sciences. But if you look, the young people who are making money, other people who are making money in larger numbers are people doing things they are talented about. So sports is a major player in turning your life around, people doing business. Where is the space for that?
Yeah, first of all, I think you cannot like aim at middle income by looking at outliers basically in the income. Like, I mean, even in the US, how many Zuckerbergs are there? Yeah, there are so many people who studied STEM, who are innovators, who are not that rich, right? So I don't really think. I think why we are not poor because we don't know. I think we are poor because the balance of power, of global power, is not in our favor. And we are not negotiating even for what we already produce. We are not getting the same prices as other people are getting. We are not part of the trade communities where the most money is. I don't think we are going to solve it merely by teaching people physics.
President Museveni was in Western Uganda, in Kawerri district the other day, on Friday, at that Rwenzori Investment Expo. And he was saying the African people generally missed the bus when they failed to transform from using muscle power to machine power. And he said, even where we are, we are still...
They failed.
They missed the bus when they failed to transition from use of muscle power, because we continue to use muscle power.
Failing means, for me, it means something was there and available. And
yes, because he gives a very fair explanation. He says, you see, there was science on the African continent many years ago. I mean, people invented fire. You don't find bigger innovation than inventing very practical things like fire. People invented tools for use they discovered the use of iron ore and turning it into tools for use, changed stones and made them into something else. That was innovation. He talked about taming animals, domesticating crops from wilderness. You have scientists in the labs
so did human beings do all of those things while they were still African?
No, he says Africans did that, but where they failed was to transition from use of muscle power into use of machine power. And the bus left and the world was able to move on, and we're still stuck behind.
With our muscle power.
With our muscle power. He says we're still sleeping. We only need to begin to wake up.
This is why we shouldn't teach people science. This is why we should teach people critical thinking. Because what all that analysis misses is how much, it completely overlooks that there was, for instance, colonialism, right? That turned this place into where you extract raw materials from, take them elsewhere for value addition, and that remains the system within which we operate, right? And that the people who colonized us didn't do it so much because they were developed, because they were more violent, as continues to be the case. The people who hold power are those who are willing to be more violent,
I want to disagree
and the
with
people
you,
they
I want to
dominate.
disagree with you. They had already moved the step. They had invented
the gun.
The Chinese invented gunpowder. The Europeans found a way to use it to fight to become violent.
Yeah.
but they had invented steamships.
That way is
They
a
had
willingness to
they
be
had,
more
they had
violent.
invented steamships. They had invented things that enabled them to come and find you here, stuck in the old way. And so many years down the road, we are still stuck
There were
somewhat in the old way. Yes.
thriving African
We might-
communities and trade. There was thriving African trade even then.
But they
So,
insula-
so to
they-
say,
We might
anyhow,
not-
going to go
we
like
might
in a
not
whole
want to
completely different
discuss the
direction.
African
Yes.
who is stuck in the muscle power, because perhaps the African who is stuck in muscle power is might have found himself or herself in that situation because of the environment. Look, let's look at the Oldman's school of thought about production, about the big market out there, and we look at his own reign, the 34-year-old. Is he saying that when he came into office, there were no people producing, or people abandoned producing when he took power? The other day I was telling you that in Luwero, in 1976, that's under Amini's regime, a small town called Kasana was producing powdered milk from the farmers. Their cattle was eaten by a group of fighters, and they were promised all these things are going to come back. 34 years, instead we are lamenting. We have had
He's
people
going to find
producing.
ways to blame the people
When you
of
go
Luwero.
to these small industrial parks we have in our country, you go to is it Nalukolongo? Nalukolongo, people are producing. Ugandans are involved in producing, but how much have they been supported by their own government? Some of them are crumbling. They are falling out of business because either they have not been lucky enough to tap into the tax waivers that are actually given to other people who
I
come
hear
into
you.
the country.
You make a fair point there. But I want to stand to...
Just a moment.
Yes.
You also have these mushrooming factories. Every other day you see the president opening factories, talking about, production value chain. How much of those items produced in our own country are branded made in Uganda? They are not.
What are they branded?
Products are made, branded made in China, made in India, and they find themselves on our market. They are produced here and sold here. And they are simply,
Is that factual?
You go and
Like
do
what
an
product?
independent study.
Yes, like what product?
You want me to dig in someone's market?
No, it will be interesting. But Agatha, Lydia talks about something interesting. He says, don't obsess about teaching sciences, obsess about critical thinking. And critical thinking is what made the Stone Age man realize that you need to find fire and do the many experiments that finally produced fire. It's critical thinking that possibly, like you say, and I think makes a lot of sense, that told this Stone Age person that if among all the animals in the wilderness, it's possible to tame a cow, it's possible to tame a goat and domesticate them. Tame a dog and domesticate it and use it for what you want to use it for. It's critical thinking that got people to think, wait a minute, now that is lost. And this continent is stuck with a lot of problems. But the science curriculum that we're talking about, that National Curriculum Development Center, I don't know how much it focuses on that critical thinking. So how do you solve common problems that are pervasive in all these countries, in all our neighborhoods?
I think I'll first refer to an article or something that was written by Timothy Kariejira on Twitter about how we obsess about these performances of... so even the few scientists we've had, we haven't seen like something big they have done, because they are going to pass in class, but if that critical thinking that Lydia talks about...
We have Chida Evie.
Where is it? Where has it moved? So
No,
if
there's some thinking there going on.
that critical thinking that Lydia talks about is absent, it doesn't matter how many distinctions you will get. And we have very many examples. We have talked about this in class, that you have someone in class who is able to get an A, but not able to express what they wrote in paper. not able to think if they haven't crammed what they have given them in the books. So critical thinking, of course, is very key. And like I was telling you during the break, this whole teaching science obsession is not a bad idea only in Uganda. I've seen statistics in Kenya, and over the last 6 years, their performance in these science subjects, the average is about 17%. 17% success rate. And that's over the last 6 or 7 years. You have years where they have averaged towards 28, but then they go back to 16. I have seen the same issues in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Tanzania. Of course, here it is worse. At least in South Africa, there were teenagers that made an airplane and
were able to fly it across the continent.
Yeah, so critical thinking. And I think someone can study history, but if you have given them that power to think about what they are going to do, and which I commend the new curriculum for, that you are reducing hours of that students are going to spend in class. I have always had problems with how our children here start class at 7, some as early as before 7, and end at 6 in the evening. How is a child going to even reflect on what they have studied? How is he going to think about something else that is not
experiment?
Yeah,
try out what they were told.
They told my son to do this ball out of banana fibers during the holiday, and many other things in that he couldn't, because he had never. He's in class at 7 years. He's in class from 7 to 5 in the evening. So you leave little time for children to grow out of. And it's not just the classroom that is going to help them. We have seen that. We have seen A's that have not transformed.
Doesn't that raise the question about parent responsibility for some of those things?
Nobody.
Yes. I mean, you've had him for the holiday. Did you get him to interact with that outside? Is he watching cartoons on TV instead of being in the field, learning and doing some critical thinking? Because there's no critical thinking.
Because the parenting we have now, we experience, and all of us on this table, is our children spend more time at school than with us. I am working every day and especially us journalists that work even up to Sunday. Even when I'm at home, I am more of how are they going to eat than what are they going to eat, or how are they going to sleep?
How did they spend the day?
More than because for me that is more important.
So real economic pressures.
Exactly, and it's the economic pressures in this country that have turned us into those kinds of parents. That your main
but as parents can't abdicate their responsibility.
We are not, and that's why we feed them amid these hardships.
We can only do what?
But we can only do so much, right? Like if the economy is hard, right? Like I have to take care of their basic needs first. It takes a certain amount of privilege to be the kind of parent we all hope we could be, right?
Yes,
so the poorer one is, the harder it is for them to make time for their children, because they must feed them, and they're struggling to feed them.
But I hear you, Lydia.
Also,
just a moment. The parents, the people have given testimonies and said their parents were beating them for choosing a career in music, for loving to sing. And their parents were beating them up and saying, no, concentrate and go to class and study. So the orientation is the problem is bigger than just government and the NCDC trying to create a new curriculum. If it doesn't provide for co-curricular activity, and that the parents are not really concerned or asking questions about co-curricular, they're actually punishing their children for not engaging, for engaging in co-curricular activity.
Because that's the mindset.
That too comes from economic pressure. Like I cannot afford
to have my son or my daughter become a musician, because I think they need to concentrate. Whether they are competent or not, they need to try and learn sciences so that they become a doctor.
So it must be
this
sciences.
is true. Like the richer, for instance, an economy is, the more it produces art, because there's enough money going around that should you take a risk And by the way, the more innovators it has, because all of these things are really risky in terms of being able to feed yourself, being able, recover if things don't go well. So, and you will still, even here in Uganda, you will find that the children, as we move on, the richer we become, the more freedom my child has to do whatever they want. But if I am concerned that they may lead themselves to starvation, as a parent, I cannot honestly encourage them to take that risk. That's why a lot of innovators, a lot of entrepreneurs come from old money. You can afford the risk, and some parents can't afford the risk. But to go back to the curriculum, I think reducing the subjects to 21 is really good. Like, how did they ever get to 43? What 43 subjects are people being taught?
Oh, I mean, there are 43, you choose 17.
That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. But also, if we're going to teach science, so you were talking about we need to be more productive. We need to look at the content of science we teach. I think what we teach right now, or at least what I was taught in science, qualifies as the history of science. Archimedes' principle, or Pythagoras, these are Greeks who existed before Christ and what they were doing. They are not teaching them how to write code, which is, we are trying to be Zuckerberg by teaching people what Greek scientists thought about, So maybe even if we're actually talking about science that is productive, and again, it doesn't have to be productive. It doesn't have to be the science with which Zuckerberg is productive, but appropriate technology. For this context, then we have to actually change the curriculum and have the courage to drop basically the colonial curriculum of, these
European
are the
history.
great white, but even in science, it is really about these old, dead white men who deserve, deserve the due recognition, but whose theories
who invented the printing press, who invented the steam engine, who invented the
telephone,
the telephone.
Whatever. Now you're teaching people who invented the telephone. The telephone you're talking about is not even in use anymore.
You're
right?
teaching computer Pentium 1.
Yeah, it's so
computer generation.
If we want science that leads to production, maybe we should be teaching people the science of making tiles. Maybe we should be getting that guy, who is making roof tiles to come to class and teach.
We have someone
science.
who has invented a helicopter in Rampara. Did you hear about that guy?
I have seen many people try
and
to
it
fly
has and it has flown around. Of course, he has crashed in it so many times. Thank God he doesn't die. But no one, and he didn't go to school. He didn't. No one in this government has ever said, what is this guy capable of doing with a little more help, with a little more facilitation.
But colleagues, I don't even think we should be teaching our children to reinvent the helicopter. It exists. Why should we make it again?
Because what I'm saying is we can make our own things without depending, because that's what the science is about. Charles started by asking why the obsession. We want to stop being reliant and dependent on other people's manufactured things.
Yes, but you see,
from a phone to a car to a helicopter to everything.
You add to innovation. If I could build my point, you add to innovation. You don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, the debate we had about Kira EV, an electric car, and you're saying an electric car, where are the charging ports? What do you do? What is the full cycle to get into that space of technology? So you're playing catch up on many things, but actually not doing critical thinking to say, what does this community need?
Yeah.
Charles,
What can
What do
I
I
add?
need? What can I add to change things? So you're training medics who are basically dispensers, because they're not involved in the science of creating medicine or finding solutions to our problems. They're trained to tell you, if you show these symptoms, it means this might be the problem, and this is the drug that you need to take. That is a different level of thinking about science, and these are our applied scientists. So if you're training chemists, are they involved in actual generation of new knowledge? If you're not generating new knowledge, then you'll continue to play catch up.
And that's
You
what
don't need people to just help you and assemble phones, and then you say,
Actually,
okay,
I
we're
think
getting
that's
closer
what we are
somewhere.
doing. I also don't believe, Charles, I've chosen deliberately to do a lot of listening to my seniors here about this particular topic. But I don't think that teaching critical thinking is only in school, or it can only be achieved by changing the curriculum. I strongly believe that yes, everyone has got a part to play, and when we are to, when we say this is what we want to achieve, we must look at all factors involved. They have talked about the cost of the education alone, and that's why you see kids going to school as early. She was talking about 7, that's the time for entering class, but they are picked as early as 4 or 5. They are driven around town. By the time they enter class, they are tired and sleeping. Then in the evening when they are brought home, they are really exhausted, they are sleeping. So a parent will not have time, enough time to engage their children. And this will affect in the end their learning. I also think that...
But these same parents, I wouldn't cut that much slack for the parents. It's the same parents who know that my child, to get a realistic chance of getting into the newspapers as a top performer, they must be in school ABC. So they live in, they live in, on the other side of the city. They want to drive the child.
But because that's where quality is. So the parents will bear all the burdens to find quality. But very lastly, about innovation, it would help. You might want to have the country headed to a particular direction. But we have had people, she was talking about someone who invented an aeroplane.
Welcome back to this last segment of the Fourth Estate, where we'll discuss two things. One, the ongoing, the meeting ended earlier today between President Yoweri Museveni and his Rwandan counterpart, Paul Kagame, in Luanda, the follow-up meeting of that MOU they signed to try and normalize relations between them. We'll also discuss fighting MPs, MP Odonga Oto and Samuel Odonga Oto, his Member of Parliament for Aru County, and his counterpart, Anthony Akol. Exchanged blows. By their own admission, both of them admit there was a problem. Odonga Oto ended up on a hospital stretcher somewhere. Said he might consider going for further medical examination over. One of them says it's a slap, another says it's a punch.
Does it matter what it was?
Moses, you report at Parliament. Tell us what exactly is
Was
going.
it a slap
What happened?
or
What the viewers should know is that the one who was punched or was slapped ended up being admitted. So Odonga Oto was admitted at Nakasero Hospital for some time, and he was.
Did he need to go? People get punched, get slapped every day. Did he need to go? Was he doing
sometimes
dramatics?
I'm not a medical practitioner, but sometimes someone might slap you in a wrong place. And
Where did they slap him?
you know that fight happened
Sorry.
actually when no one was seeing.
He said
Most of us
he
go
said
to
there is
know.
a swelling on his somewhere in his eye.
Most of us were running around with the
He fears there
budget.
might have been brain damage.
We were running around with the, I for one was running around with the budget framework paper, which was passed on the same day. So many things were happening, only to hear about this fight. But then later on, we went and interacted with these.
The slap.
Are they gentlemen? I don't think gentlemen fight.
Honorables, more than gentlemen.
Are they honorables? So one was alleging to, that's Honorable Anthony Akol of Clark North in Amuru district. He says that Honorable Oto provoked him by decampaigning him using land. You know, land is not only sensitive here in Buganda, it's sensitive all over. So it so happened that...
But especially that side of the world. Don't you remember women undressed over land?
In
The
Abba.
upper land has
the
been...
the cause of the fight is not
So-
really what we need to be engaging in a discussion.
but
Except we should. I think we should
No,
understand.
members of
how
parliament.
did it start?
Members of parliament that think the only way they can resolve a political disagreement back in their constituencies is by flexing in the corridors of parliament, for me,
Okay.
is the thing of asking.
Let's first see,
There
let's
are
first see
human
how
beings,
it
they lost
happened.
their tempers.
Because
I
according to
think
the narrative that we
backstory is
have,
important.
is that Honorable Akol had invited some people from his constituency to visit him at Parliament. You know, they usually visit. So when they were in the corridor, Otto comes and says, you people, actually, this man is the one who is bridging the sale of your land. So he picked land and sold it to one of the investors. I think it's Madivan. Now,
Otto alleged.
Alleged, yes.
Before
So Akol kept his call until his visitors or voters had left. So he went and said, "You man, how can you embarrass me before my voters?" So a scuffle started, and then you know Odongoto sometimes has those martial art things.
He said he trained in martial arts for 4 years.
He ended up kicking Honorable Akol, either intentionally or
The
by
drama
accident.
of it.
Yes,
In the
because I remember during the Tojuko Atako, Otto expressed of how he could fight one of those SFC boys, and he stretched his leg, but without touching the what? The soldier.
So you
So
think
I
even
think
there he was demonstrating?
I don't know, but in so doing, the leg touched Honorable Akol.
So he kicked Akol.
So he kicked Akol. Now, in
They
retaliation, this one was slapped, and immediately he landed on the ground. The next thing we saw was the Parliament ambulance
Taking
and
him.
taking him to Nakasero
They
Hospital.
were overreacting.
What is involved here is
Martial
whether
arts-
it was dramatic or real.
Kung Fu movies I have
there's
watched, people
taxpayers' money
get
involved.
kicked and wake up. And
The money is on insurance, and part of our money was
Lydia,
was consumed. That's the story.
the Kung Fu movies I have watched, and there are many, people get kicked the hell out and
So
they still stand
imagine-
up.
They still-
They
and
still,
fight back.
they still
Those
stand
are
up and fight
stunts.
back.
Imagine for us, our children fall sick and we look for Panadol. We can't afford to take them to a hospital.
This one was slapped.
In the member of parliament, he says he has 4 years of training. He gets slapped. His kick missed.
Maybe he was slapped in the wrong area. You never know.
No, but what kind of parliament are we talking about? I mean, you're talking about on the same day that the budget framework paper is passed.
Yes.
The
And the
focus
national,
of the
actually, even the NDP3.
Yes, and the focus of the world is of the country is diverted, and we're discussing this instead of discussing the budget framework paper. Seriously?
And we
So why are we
that problem
discussing
right
it?
now? We are
No, I mean
contributing
you
that
can, you
problem.
can't ignore it. If these are the people you have in parliament, you can't
Right.
ignore it.
Well, there's another way to look at it.
Yes.
That the parliament is representative
Of what?
of us, the
Ah,
people.
but
We
s-
have
I
regular
say you can go and fight in parliament.
gunfight.
No, also,
we have
but
gunfighters in there. We have fist fighters
But
in there.
also,
We have, I don't
you
know,
guys,
all sorts of.
cut the
it's a people's
MPs some
parliament.
slack.
Mm.
You have a parliament that has about 500 people, human beings. They're going to be and
426, I think.
Yeah,
no,
it's
461.
461.
461.
Exactly.
461.
So this is close
Okay,
to
so you-
500.
when you round off, okay.
Yeah, they are human beings. They are not, they are MPs, but they are human beings. There are going to be emotions over this and that. And this is not the first time they have fought. You can say before they have fought over our national interests, but
Yeah, but they fought.
they fought. So so it still goes to you have
You earn,
when you have
earn
people
the title honorable, and that part of you earn part of the methods you use to earn that is by being able to control your emotions.
really.
Yes.
Let's
I
not
think-
pretend that any of those people are actually honorable. I mean, okay, those ones fought. How many of those people are thieves, murderers who came to power by killing my relatives in the world? Nobody. I don't.
You're almost
Well,
whispering
the-
those words. You're almost whispering those words.
are possible dishonorable
those are
things.
Lydia's views, not the views of
you
the
know-
No.
Yes.
And you're entitled to them. Nobody should hold them against you
Just
because facts
coincidentally,
exist about that.
coincidentally our sisters in Nairobi, The Nation, they had a headline of why Kenyans vote clowns. Is it clowns?
Yes.
And I was like, okay, so what would be the most suitable title for the two
Headline.
MPs that were, headline, for these that fought in parliament when actually the House was supposed to be discussing, and it was discussing an important or two important, very important matters of this country. One involving the budget framework that forecasts our country's budget and spending areas, and two, the National Development Plan, which is guiding the country. And
Okay,
Sometimes they do meaningful
It's
contributions
true.
when they speak to the floor.
It's true we send them there to represent, legislate over national issues. But by the virtue of them being human beings, they have personal issues. Conflicts are going. That's why I started by saying you have 500 MPs in one place. So conflicts are going to be there. And Odonga Oto, of all people, we shouldn't even be surprised. When they were discussing, was it Tajkwatako when he came and rapped and went to the gym to show that's how
part of the
he
drama.
thrives.
But he's
He
doing
thrives
dramatics.
on drama,
Yes.
and maybe that's why his people keep voting him.
He's relatable.
Exactly, because surely, that's why I was saying it's important that maybe we understand why Akol, who at least hasn't been a clown, why we would engage in a fight like that. Those people have their personal issues, and they are going, and you're not going to deal with the provocative person who always wants to be in the limelight, and you expect that things are not going to go haywire.
But
and
perhaps there
also
should be punishment.
also before, we have seen them fight all the time. We have seen them fight during Tojkwatako. We have seen them throw chairs. So really, I'm not surprised that because this time they are not fighting over something that we knew about or related with, that they were fighting.
Okay. Let's end this discussion in Luanda, Angola, where Presidents Yoweri Museveni and Paul Kagame are trying again to normalize relations between the two countries. President Museveni commented on Friday again, commented about the crisis over Ugandan milk going across the border to Kenya, and said it's not a big deal. What we have heard from both Museveni and Kagame over the last 1 year about the trade relations between Kampala and Kigali is not much, but there seem to be real issues affecting border people in Kabale and Chisoro, people trying to eke out a living, to cross the border and smuggle some food items, smuggle a few things on a border that's supposed to be part of the common market, East African common market. That movement should be free between the two countries, but now for a full 1 year, movement is not free between the two countries. And
Yeah, I remain quite torn about this. On the one hand, I want to take it seriously because of how many lives are actually affected by this. How many ordinary people cannot trade, cannot see their relatives, cannot just live their lives at the border. How many people have lost huge amounts of money in what used to be thriving businesses. But at the same time, like the people at the top seem, they do not dignify the dispute at all. You have Uganda just insisting there's no problem. He's just throwing a tantrum. And then you have Rwanda saying everything is a problem. It is.
Says, how can you talk about integration? Integration is just not a buzzword. That's what Paul Kagame was saying the other day.
When you're arresting citizens anyhow. So, but also it seems like no matter how much they talk, the next address is going to repeat the same grievances, as if none of these were, as if they've never been inside a room to iron, to iron these out, tick a few things off. No matter, even when there seems to be, okay, one Uganda, we were saying 2 weeks ago, had conceded, had compromised, given, offered an olive branch. Still, the next time President Kagame gives a speech, it's the same exact grievances that started the. So it really, it's very defeating because it feels like they just have to stop being angry at each other and the rest of us, for as long as they are angry at each other, ordinary people will remain beholden to their tempers, beholden to whatever it is that remains, to an ordinary person, really unclear what is wrong. But they really have turned, citizens into children in an abusive household, in a toxic marriage.
Moses?
It started as a renovation of a road near the border for our neighbors.
No, the one border stop center.
It started, at least they were renovating their side. It then grew into espionage, politics, border, what was it? Trade biases. And now we are talking about lives of human beings involved. It is very unfortunate that the two countries talk about democracy, but democracy never works in either country. Because look, what is true is that lives are being lost. People are being shot, dead. That alone warrants at least the people we call representatives in parliament to take action. But what we're saying, what? Uganda is silent, that's the parliament of Uganda, and Rwanda too is silent. We are talking about economic implications. We are not trading.
Why aren't you asking these questions at parliament?
And both...
Moses, why aren't you asking these members of parliament, they are called the Odonga Otos,
but
to ask
why
them
don't
those
you first
questions
wait
about
me to drive, for me to drive my point? I get what you're saying, that we should be asking them, but no, I'm asking them.
Are we not?
But we do.
Are we asking those
We've
questions?
also talked to ministers who say, the big man has told us, we leave this issue out. He's going to handle it. You have foreign affairs that is basically not involved. But what am I saying? If the problem is between two people who are putting countries, let me speak for Uganda. You have a president who is putting our country at risk. Our people are dying. Our economy is not doing well. And the constitution provides for actions you can take as a parliament. And you cannot do that, and you say you are a democracy. What is very, what I believe about the Luanda meeting is that agreements will be written in Rwanda and ratified, but none will be implemented. We are dealing with the two so-called revolutionaries, but theirs is about the gun. It would be very unfortunate if the end result is the two countries fighting. I think our leaders shouldn't be leading us that direction. They should take steps to basically sit as two old friends, talk, apologize, and let the countries move. Because the main problem is about these two.
Agatha, you follow Rwanda things more closely. What exactly the latest meeting in Rwanda? Because they were, everybody knew there wasn't be much movement after the last meeting that they did, and the joint communique that they issued after that they signed.
The one of
Rwanda.
August last year.
Yes, of August last year.
But many other activities have also followed after that. Me, what I have not understood, and I can't understand it from the Rwandan side, like it's where I have someone I can ask, because for them they are interested in us knowing their problem. Here no one is. So what I would like to know is, Lydia talked about Uganda extending an olive branch. Yes, it did. It released some of the people they wanted released for them to even at least start talking about border opening, because that's the condition Rwanda had put there. We are not going to talk about opening the border until you release our people. Uganda did that at the expense of Ugandans that almost rioted, that they were wronged, and the people that wronged them have been released without justice. And I want to understand what Rwanda has done to at least also show goodwill that okay, let's also do this. But prisoners are released, and hardly 2 weeks Ugandans are shot.
I've been following, if it is his right Twitter handle, the Minister of State, Philemon Mateke.
I don't think it is.
I don't know if it is, but he has real issues, and Rwanda has been complaining about him. They complained about him openly, and I think he's the commander. Now, one is Dr. Philemon Mateke has been a part of this country's history, politics rather, for a very, very, very long time.
Yeah.
I do not know if he has capacity to command a platoon. Rwanda thinks he's fomenting. He's the commander of
those
destabilizing it. And then you have a series of tweets from him, basically attacking his government and thinking that
Well, cutting deals with the devil.
yes, yes, uses all the strong language, cutting deals with the devil for really being weak at its response.
I saw Dictor trying to understand him,
Yes.
and maybe Dictor is right. People that, the proximity, people that are being killed every day at that border, in Bufumbira, Chisoro, where he comes from, the proximity of seeing your people being killed can make you forget you're a minister that is actually supposed to be calming down these tempers, and also, if Rwanda, I mean, if what we know about Uganda making an effort is right, we want to see the same gestures from the other side, and yes, and that's what international relations are about. But if you say, okay, you must do this, and we say, okay, let's do it, because Lydia is saying Uganda says there's no problem, but no, Uganda has said it before. I mean, recently when they sent Ambassador Yebale there, President Museveni wrote on his Twitter handle and said, we want to make amends.
And Foreign Affairs Minister Sam Kutesa called a press conference to basically talk about that.
So they send Ambassador Yebale there, they come and do what one of the conditions, they start at least with that. You want to see the same, at least someone showing any sense of...
But
what
Agatha,
Uganda
if I
says is that we as a country have no problem with Rwanda, but we acknowledge that they have problems with us. Therefore, Rwanda has no amends to make, has no gestures to make, because they were in this equation.
I did say recently, and Agatha just hinted on it, that there are Ugandans who believe or who say and have evidence that they have been wronged. Women whose husbands were kidnapped out of this country and taken across the border, and they haven't seen them for as many as 4 years. They've been running around. They've written an official petition, which they have shared with the government of Uganda and international agencies and diplomatic missions in this country to say, wait a minute, look, tell us where our husbands are. Mothers who are saying, tell us where our children are that were taken out of this country. But at what level do you say this is a problem if, as a person living near the border, you are barring citizens every other day? Sometimes you have to negotiate at the local level for the bodies to be released from one side of the border to the other side of the border, and this has been running for so long. So are we as journalists failing on our job? And are we as citizens, journalists, parliament, as parliament, as journalists, to demand for more concrete answers from our government?
You see, Charles, a lot has been demanded. Trust me, MPs have raised this issue in parliament about Rwanda. Honorable Samuju, the opposition chief whip, is one of
has held so many
yes. So MPs have said what is happening, and the presiding officer has said this is a matter of security, and the concerned bodies are investigating. But going back to the happenings, you have Rwanda saying that you detained our people without trial. At least subject them to a formal form of justice. We know that, okay, these guys are under trial for doing ABCD in Uganda. But what do you do? What you do?
I hear you on that.
Yes.
I have said on this show before, I have read a list from the Rwanda government of its citizens it claims have been illegally detained in this country. It's a very long list. The one I have seen personally has over 100 people. The ones that were released are 9 people.